Can you guys hear me? Awesome. So, I said earlier, who was here for part one? Good crowd. So, welcome to part two. Thank you for staying or leaving to grab lunch and running on your way back. Who did that? Who went to grab lunch, came back? Wow. Awesome, thank you. Part two is going to talk about, the analogy I like to kind of show off is, I've just let me and 200 of my closest friends here at Ignite into my house with my keys and have done nothing about preventing you from taking my stereo, my comic books, my TV, and all that kind of stuff. So the conversation for the next 45-ish is to discuss, again, level set the guest access story, and then talk about the mechanisms that we can help provide awareness, governance, and control. Good afternoon, my name is Michael Mukalian. I am a modern workplace technical architect out of the Philadelphia MTC in Malvern, Pennsylvania, which is just about 20 or so odd minutes out of Philly. It's near a place called King of Prussia, huge mall, that kind of stuff. We do engagements over the course of the days of the week that range from high-level ideation sessions to full-on hackathons around all sorts of different technologies and workloads. And today's discussion came about from one or number of those events for a specific customer that after we kind of tailored it and tweaked it a bit, was very pertinent to a lot of customers like yourselves because they themselves had the same challenges, especially around today's topic or this topic, because once you let everybody in your house, you need to make sure that all your stuff's safe. And that's kind of what today's topic is, right? So when you look at how we kind of got here, we start, where'd we go? Let's examine that a little bit, right? So companies, lines of business, people in those areas need to have conversations and work. You know, we used to just call collab, old school SharePoint people called SharePoint collab, when at the end of the day, that's really just doc management. Collab is kind of like Teams, where everybody's talking and chatting and emailing and putting files and stuff. When everybody's doing this kind of work, they're gonna work with people that they need to get their work done, whether they be internal folk, internal to your tenant, internal to your organization, or folks that are outside your organization that we call guests, right? For the purposes of this discussion this afternoon, a guest is an individual or individuals that do not have an identity in your organization. So if I'm in company, if company A has a tenant and they invite me as Microsoft.com, my Microsoft.com account is considered a guest in their tenant. What does that mean? That means that ideally, the guest organization is going to control the authentication layer, Michael's Michael, and then the guest tenant's going to control the authorization, all the stuff that they can get to. So far, so good? Relatively simple, but it's a good kind of level set because more often than not, folks have gone down the old path of just slamming people in an Active Directory, and we'll talk about that as well, on how that's technically a guest, but not really in the perspective of how we talk about guests, right? Guest access also exposes a couple other things because from a line of business perspective, people say, I need to get Bob in because Bob's outside my org. They don't say, I need to get Bob in, and oh, by the way, put in DLP so people can't look at certain documents, put in the CASB so they don't block, block downloads. They don't ask for all that. They just say, get Bob in, right? So IT and security also hear all those other bits and pieces that they need to be aware of to provide that level of access so that people can get their work done, right? Does everybody kind of agree with that? We don't want to open the doors to everybody. We kind of do because everybody's here, but we don't want to open doors to everybody and have them take out all my stuff. That would be a bad thing, right? So how did we get here? Let's look at the picture and landscape of what this kind of looks like and what might have changed, right? So this is the extent of my drawing. If you guys want awesome UI UX, that is not me. These are just little boxes that I got a little bit of a hand with from PowerPoint. So Microsoft Teams at the top, Azure Active Directory at the bottom. There's my identity plane. There's the mechanism that says Michael's Michael or Bob's Bob or whoever's whoever. That's who you are. Teams sits on top of all of these other services that we have. Outlook, SharePoint, OneDrive, Exchange, OneNote, Planner, et cetera, et cetera. All those things sit on top of an Office 365 group, right? Folks are aware of that. When I create a team or when I create a plan and that kind of stuff, I'm getting a group created as well, right? Folks get that? Good. That is my container. as we talked about in the prior session, that is my container for my people, as well as certain settings that I could put on that team to provide guests on or off in that instance, right? But what else do we have to offer that level of security, that level of compliance, that level of a warm fuzzy that says, you know what, I'm cool with letting Bob in because I have all this other stuff that protects my stuff, right? If people just turn on guest access and you thought you're done, please don't tell me you did that. You gotta start looking at stuff like this because this will protect you, right? Specifically, these 4 boxes, right? And we're gonna talk about some of the capabilities of what each of those may mean and show you a couple demos, a couple sets of screenshots because one just wasn't cooperating correctly. So we'll kind of walk through some stuff like that. And I didn't press start, so we'll do that and somebody will call me out for 5 minutes, right? So, where did it all begin, right? So, very simplistic network diagram, right? This is what my on-premises network looks like, right? I have a little circle, I have a bunch of stuff in it. I have boxes, I have my Azure, my Active Directory, not Azure. I say Azure so much now, I keep on forgetting that, right? I have my Active Directory, and I have the employee. The employee is in my organization. He's a member of my organization. He's added to my Active Directory. That's where he is, right? This is an employee scenario. Traditional employee access, as we're calling it, right? I can also provide them a level of remote access via VPN, VDI, all that kind of junk, right? I'm still enabling them to get to the work they need to get their workday done, but in a little bit of a remote fashion, right? He's still part of my Active Directory. He's still in my system. I'm just providing him a different way in. So far, so good? Are guests in the old way any different? Yes? No? Nobody cares. I heard no. We'll go with you. That is correct. How do I traditionally allow guests in my tenant? Notice my guest, he's a little rainbow person. I add them to my Active Directory. This is what we used to do, right? I'm slamming in all these people in my on-premises Active Directory to give them access to the assets and everything, systems, content, all that stuff, because I work with Bob on the outside, so Bob's got to get into my stuff, or his stuff, our stuff, right? How do I provide a certain level of remote access? The same way. I'm going to give them VPN. I'm going to give them VDI, pop them in a DMZ, blah, 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 right? They are functioning no different than a quote-unquote normal, regular employee because that's what we used to do, right? The reason why I'm kind of like slowing down here and harping on this is because this is the old and busted model. We'll talk about new hotness in a second. The caveat is there may be instances where this still applies for people depending upon the type of role and the type of work that's going on. But if we kind of ignore that little caveat to the side and we talk about guest access, conversations of that also bring up what we call zero trust. If I don't trust, sorry, you're here. If I don't trust you, that shouldn't mean I trust my employees any more or less, right? I don't trust anybody. I actually trust people, but you know, company, I don't trust anybody, right? I want to make sure my stuff is safe, my stuff is secure, my stuff is governed, I know what's going on with my stuff, right? So when we try to lock this stuff down, we do that, right? You ain't getting in until you're back in the office and doing all this kind of other stuff, right? So welcome to the cloud, right? Welcome to Azure Active Directory, Office 365, Dynamics 365. Welcome to our cloud. We have all these other servers, one cloud, right? What does that mean? That means that I have, that's about as cloud as I can draw. I have a cloud with Azure Active Directory, right? My Azure Active Directory, ideally, has a synchronization mechanism of that, whether it's federation, SSO, password hash, blah, 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 whatever all that stuff is. So now I'm pushing and synchronizing identities from my on-premises implementation to the cloud, thereby allowing the cloud to govern who I am. That is important because from the perspective of Office, Dynamics, all that stuff in our cloud, Azure, it all starts with who you are in the cloud. It all starts with who you are in Azure Active Directory. Once we know who you are, we can do all sorts of stuff when it's in the cloud, right? We can provide explicit level of access to the services that are in the cloud. We talked about Teams earlier today, which was really not that long ago, right? But all the other stuff, SharePoint Online, OneDrive, et cetera, right? Through a mechanism governed by Intune using a process called conditional access, right? Conditional access kind of sounds exactly what it means, right? I'm going to give you access on certain conditions. When I look up the definition of redundant in the dictionary, it says C, redundant, right? So what does that mean? That means that I can set up policies within Intune that govern certain actions based on who I am, what device I'm on, what application I'm trying to get to, and the actual data, right? I can also throw up risk there, but risk is a little bit of an AI behavioral mechanism that's still part of the conversation, but I want to kind of leave it out here right now. It'll actually look at how many times you've been doing X steps, Y steps, and start grading the action that you're doing and risk it, rate the risk and blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, we're using this level of telemetry, this level of information to say, yes, you can do something, no, you can't do something, or I'll give you a little bit of access to do something. In the old school thought, we used to think of ones and zeros, right? On or off. You're either in doing work, or if you're not coming in the office, you ain't get work done. Right? Just that's not how it happens. Nowadays, I can get work done from this, right? I'm not creating a Word doc. That's why I'm still wearing glasses and stuff, but I'm approving things, reading emails, all that kind of stuff. I'm still able to get to the information I need to get to and get some work done on a device like this, right? So we're able to control and become aware, based on these items, what you're trying to do, and give you that level, that slider that says how much that I can get them to get work done, or just say no, right? So when we talk about it from an employee perspective, and we're in this model, that also exposes other cloud services, right? Other clouds on the right, they kind of look better than my first cloud, but cloud's cloud, right? If I'm looking at stuff like, say, Salesforce, Workday, blah, 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 I'm still able to now use the same mechanisms, the same technology that govern my access and apply it at that level. As long as I'm setting up the controls and linkages between those services to Azure Active Directory, this picture here in the middle, that's my org, can also be done for all of the other services outside of my cloud, outside of my tenant. I can create policies that say, Mike can't log into Salesforce from home. Mike can't log into Workday on the weekend. Stuff like that, right? Because the mechanisms providing the communication between the two allow me to have that level of control to provide that level of granularity for those controls, right? This is important because at the end of the day, what I'm talking about is no different than how do I lock down people to get work done? And these are the mechanisms with which to do it. Good? Awesome. Governed by the same properties, identity, device, apps, and data. You're going to hear that a lot, right? And that's why identity is always the top. Once I know, or once we know who you are, all bets are off. I can do whatever I want. I can get as constrained as I want, or just open up everything if I want because I trust you, right? And this is important, right? This is why this step of synchronizing identities between on-premises and the cloud is so important, and more often than not, the very first step in any migration story and migration scenario to the cloud from on-prem, right? If I talk too fast, if you've got questions, raise your hands, that kind of stuff. So, I also have this notion of being able to expose my on-premises application still through the cloud, right? I can use something called Azure App Proxy that will expose web-enabled or browser-based enabled applications that live on-prem through my cloud, still governed by conditional access. So say I have some SharePoint 2010 on-prem site that's still living on a bunch of boxes under some guy's desk, because that's happened. We all know that's happened. Some of us have actually done that, but we won't talk about that, right? I can still expose that through the cloud, ultimately resulting in an ability to create, say, a team where one of the tabs points back down to that on-premises asset. I'm now using the cloud to look at my stuff on-prem. That's cool, right? But I'm still governed by that level of conditional access. Those policies, again, are covered by Microsoft Intune to provide that level of granularity, right? You're going to hear, again, some consistent things I'm talking about, right? Identity, devices, apps, and data. Again, very important. So, how do guests fit in here, right? Old school way was treat them just like the employee, right? Just slam them in the AD, sync them back up, we're all done. That is not the case, right? Guests, again, are cloud only. Traditional model, if I go back to my Men in Black movie days, old and busted, slam them in the AD, they get more access than they should, they can wander through my global access list, they can do a whole bunch of stuff that may or may not be a security thing for you folks, but again, more level of access than they should have or should need to get work done, right? If I'm working with Bob and his company, I should not have more access than I need to. Just Bob's stuff in Bob's team and Bob's site, right? That's what guest access provides. They're provisioned only in the cloud. They utilize no license. They have no access to any on-prem assets unless you give it to them through that other mechanism I talked about earlier, right? It is an Azure AD capability. Level set. We cool with that? Awesome. It's very important because I had that conversation all the time with customers because I swear I'll go into an hour in a conversation and then the light goes off people's heads and go, that's not what I meant by guests, but I'm saying guests. So, our guest user's back on the board. He wants in. He gets invited. Gets an email, whatever that mechanism is, right? Because he's in the cloud, that means he's above the fold. He gets access to nothing below the yellow line. He does not exist below the yellow line, right? The only place he exists is in Azure Active Directory, technically as an entry in AD with a little # ext #, and a little bit that says guest, right? That's how I know. There is no password for that individual. You're not governing his password, right? His authentication mechanism is the governing body of where he's coming from, right? They live here, they're added, but again, with that little bit of a hashtag. So, what does that mean? As a guest, ideally, not ideally, but if I had Azure AD already, standard Azure AD, Office 365, D365, whatever tenant I have, I'm in. If I sign into my tenant, if I sign into my Office 365 tenant, and you invite me to your tenant, I'm going to sign into mine, he gives me access, I don't need to sign in again, we're federated, right? It's Office 365, we're federated with all our own stuff, right? That's how that works. Get ready for this one. We're federated with Google. Oh my God, I said Google. I'm being recorded. So, if I give access to a gmail.com account, and they set it up correctly, he's going to sign into Gmail. If that Gmail address is invited in, they're invited in, no secondary password necessary. We're federated with that organization. Right? Make sense? And ideally, if you have like an MS Live consumer, Hotmail, Outlook, blah, 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 right? So anything pretty much via SAML WS Fed will allow you to have that capability going across, where I'm only asking them once. They're governed by that quote-unquote outside body. That's the authentication layer. Authorization happens inside my cloud or your cloud, right? So if the organization here fires Mike, not that I would be fired, but let's call that out, fires Mike, that ID's not getting in, that ID's gone now. He ain't getting authenticated by them to move him inside. That's not going to happen, right? That is a control mechanism where you're no longer managing their passwords. You're not managing the identity per se. You're letting the outside company who you have an agreement with govern that individual. You have policies and paperwork and blah, 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 all that stuff, right? But you're basically saying, they own the password, I'm going to let them into certain pieces of stuff, right? What happens with a service like Yahoo? Well, there are services that don't provide SAML, where they can get what's called a one-time passcode in an email that says, hey, type in this code when you get in, and that's how you get in. That's considered their password for that time frame, 24 hours, whatever that number is, right? So Michael Mukalian at yahoo.com, that is not my email address, gets invited. That email address will get an email from the org. It says, great, you've been invited to this team. Type in this code, you're good to go, right? And I'm moving forward again, right? That also works for on-prem email, anything of that nature, right? I now have, again, another mechanism with which to invite guests independent of where they are, right? Because again, we're concerned about not so much the authorization. The authorization is happening on this side. You're you. Once you're in, you're in. I had that agreement with you guys, right? When we talk about that governance, who can enable guest users? We talk about whitelist, blacklist, a couple folks that were here earlier. A lot of what's on the board here kind of came up as questions after the fact, right? Who's inviting them? Enabling single sign-on, multi-factor authentication, terms of use. Folks familiar with Azure AD terms of use, raise your hand. A couple people, I'll call it out. I don't have an example here. Terms of use allows you to display a PDF upon the first time you sign into a tenant, make you scroll down to the bottom, not just click accept, make you scroll down to the bottom so that you've read it, but everybody knows they just hit Control-N, right? Everybody does that, right? You get to the bottom, then you hit accept, right? And that's logged, that's audited. So when they say, well, I didn't know that policy, yes, it did, because you roll down the bottom and you just hit accept, right? I can have these rules and regulations that are applied to provide me that type of stuff. So let's kind of show off what this example would be from a Google perspective. And I apologize here, I did screenshots because, all right, raise your hand. Who had a really consistent Wi-Fi connection this week? Nobody, right? So in this instance, I have a couple screens, so we'll walk through some of that stuff, right? So I apologize. Here's my team, right? This is a team in my tenant. I'm going to go invite Charles Contoso because apparently he's a big-time owner of Contoso.com and Fabricam and all those guys. He's going to go in to my team, right? Gmail.com. I'm going to add him as a guest. He gets an email, says, click here, open in Microsoft Teams, right? This is the first time I'm going in, right? Google's going to go, wait, I'm going to associate your personal info. You cool with that? Say yes, allow that to happen. Go over the permissions, read the terms, accept. Then, because I need more information, because in this instance I'm saying guests need more than just a password in Google, I'm going to say I need you to start doing MFA. So this is saying we need to set you up for MFA. I'm not in yet until this gets done. If I was to go out of here and say close the browser and try and sign in again, I'm going to get this again because I did not set up any MFA for that user, or me as that user, right? Fire up the Microsoft Authenticator app, I'm going to download it, set up your account, you'll scan a code, open up your authenticator, click code, you take a picture of it, try it out, it'll put you in, it'll say success, and then once you're in, you get access to the team. Every time after that, you just sign into Google. In this instance, he'll get a little MFA warning on his phone, click the approve, Face ID, Touch ID, whatever. And that's how they're in, and they're always in that way because in that instance, we said, this guy's a guest, guests require MFA, right? There are scenarios where you want everybody to have MFA, say your admins, that kind of stuff. I wouldn't say everybody. Question? Azure. Good question. So if you have another MFA outside the fence, you're going to hit it twice.
That was a Google example.
Yeah, but in the Google, no, you're only getting that once, right? Unless it's set up that way, right? We are working with, like right now, I think our own tenant like hits you twice if it's two Office 365 tenants. So they're working on that communication where it's just one, right? I'm not on the product team, but I can take a yay. That's fine with me, right? So I'm in. So now let's do a little MFA sign-in through Teams. And if I show you this, let's see if this works. So let's do 3. All right, so this is my open browser here. I'm going to go to teams.microsoft.com. I'm going to get challenged for Alex. I'm going to put in his password. And before I hit enter, I didn't test this out. Let's see if this works. So oh, really? All right, then I can't do it that way. I'll show you my phone. So, enter. Approve sign-in request. My little authenticator went off. Sorry, I can't make that work over there, right? So I'm getting the button here. So I'm going to hit approve. He's going to go in. All right? In this instance, I specifically created a policy that said, for Alex, hit him with an MFA when he comes into Teams. It's a very focused example, but an example nonetheless of the types of policies that you can create within the system, right? We also have CASB governing the connection between the two. This is looking at the traffic. This is looking at downloads. This is looking at actions. This is looking at things that are happening along the wire as Alex is doing work. And this is a notification that you can tailor that says, hey, we're watching. Or you can get as funny as you want or whatever, or not even show it, right? You can decide to go that route as well. But if I show you the actual policy, and you'll notice if you look at my policies when they pop up, I'm kind of picking on Alex, right? So no offense to Alex. But I have a policy that says, for Alex only, I could have done all guest users, all external users. I could have done a specific directory role. I could pick more than one user, more than one group, or a group. I can construct this policy that basically says, for this person, this identity, for this app, require MFA. Right? So let's kind of double click that a little bit. I can now say, you know what, forget about Teams. I want all my Office apps. I want my Salesforce app. I want my on-prem app that I'm exposing through Azure ID App Proxy to require MFA for guests. I can start doing stuff like that, right? I can use the same type of policies to govern and dictate the kind of actions that I can take once I'm in. Download, not download, view, not copy, not print, not share, blah, 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 right? I can get super granular with this because from the perspective of the policies and conditional access inside Intune, it's no longer just thinking about on or off or ones and zeros. It's that opaqueness. How much can I let them do to get work done? Nah, they're no way, right? So the example we use in our office a lot is grandma's PC, and I kind of pick on grandma. So you do a lot of work at home, doing a whole bunch of stuff on your laptop, getting all the stuff done. You're missing dinner, slamming a laptop closed, put it away, you're gonna go run to grandma's house. And, oh shoot, I forgot to add something to my PowerPoint. So you're gonna log on to grandma's PC, which is old school AOL, you hear beep boop, whatever, right? You're logging in, portal.office.com, challenges you, you're good, put in my password. Wait a second, I'm gonna get an MFA because I'm on a non-domain joined device. I said I was me, I gave it the correct password, but it said, you know what, you're coming in on a device I don't know, I'm gonna MFA you. I'll get a notification on my phone, I'm good. Then it's gonna go, wait a second, I'll get you into PowerPoint, I'll let you play online, but you're not gonna be able to download that, print it, share it, copy it, because you're on a non-domain joined device. I'll let you still work PowerPoint online, Office online, play with all the stuff that you need to play with, get your work done, but you're not leaving my box. You're not leaving my tenant. And that's the other end of the extreme, or one of the extremes that you can get to with these policies. These policies get very granular of the type of work you can do. We all used to think ones and zeros. You're not in my office, you're not getting anything done. You're not VPN through this. That was weird. You're not getting work done that way, right? So we offer these controls and capabilities to kind of get you as tailored as you want to get work done. Folks good with that? All right. So we'll cruise that real quick because that was my little screenshots in case Wi-Fi got lost again. There's our very exciting MFA. Yay. So guests, from this perspective, don't act any different as normal employees, right? I can now slide to them that conditional access bar, just like I did it for the normal employee, right? I can say all my policies that I've just created for my normal users, I can apply them as well to guests or create guest-specific ones, right? Those controls are available across the stack and should always be thought of independent of guests or not. So there's a point here, right? Just because you're an employee doesn't necessarily make you more trustworthy. Zero trust, right? Granted, nobody goes to work to get fired, right? But that doesn't mean you trust everybody, right? So the zero trust way of thinking is we're going to create rules for everybody. And just like this guy, he's governed by his identity, his data, his access, his devices. What if I want to take stuff out? right? What if a guest is trying to get work done, working on docs, things of that nature, and he wants to download them, right? Kind of the scenario we just talked about, right? I can utilize what's called cloud app security to provide me a mechanism to control that path. I can say, you know what? Kind of the scenario I just talked about for grandma. We're not going to let you download stuff, but I'll let you work with it online. You got to get stuff done. That's what you do, right? And because I have cloud app security here, I have it everywhere. My cloud, my guests, my other third-party cloud services like WordsGate and Salesforce. I can apply those same controls, those same policies, or create app-specific ones if I want to kind of get that granular. Note, the more you create, the more you're managing. Right? There's no magic easy button for that. Right? So be mindful of all the things you're doing. Right? So I can do the whole block by location. I could be like on my phone, and as soon as I leave the office, nope. Or the whole impossible travel. How many people have used a Tor browser? Raise your hand. Come on, raise your hand. All right, 5? Really? Okay, fine. So 1 minute I'm in Malvern, PA. 20 minutes later I'm in Turkey. That's not happening. So I'm going to block that because that's impossible travel. I note that Mike can't travel that far, and we haven't invented Star Trek transporters yet, so that's not going to work, right? So we can get as fine-grained as we want with these controls. So let's kind of look at some of this stuff, right? So the example we have here is protecting malicious files. If I look at a team here, and let me spin up my team real quick. You're looking at something that looks kind of a little bit innocuous, right? I have a bunch of test files in my document here, my SharePoint folder inside Teams. But if I pick one, can't get to it. Why is that case? Because ATP is saying, this has got a virus, this is a malicious file, we're not letting you click on this file, download it, whatever. We're saying the system here is allowing me to control, scan these files and say, oops, we're not letting you bring that down, there's something wrong with this file, right? If I would say, oh, I'll get around you, I'll go into SharePoint and go directly, right? So I'm going to go to SharePoint. Do the same thing. I'm going to see my document library, all my documents with my red X's. If I try to open it up, it's going to go compromised by malware. You're not doing anything. Right? So Office ATP allows for all this kind of stuff, whether they be links, things that I'm pasting, things of that nature. Right? So this level of control and granularity you have. Right? Same kind of view here, taking the screenshots, trying to click on it. Same thing we just looked at. Now, how do I block downloads, right? So if I look at another team that has my files, say Bob works in the HR department for Contoso. There's a bunch of files I have here. I want to try and download this file. So I say download, trying to download it here. It's going to go, nope. Or in this case, it looks like it was downloaded, right? So for whatever reason, it did bring up my, my message box here. But if I open this, really, you're going to work for me today? Oh, you little, ooh. Wow, demo fail. All right, let's try this again. So I can go inside the browser, or in this case, inside Teams. I can work with the data. So I can play with it, I can add text, blah, 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 if I want to, right? Or in this case, edit it. Right? I can close that, but if I try to download it, let's see if this stops it again. If I do download, there you go. It was asleep. You'll get a download block, right? But wait, you downloaded something. No, I didn't. It's because it says the file you're trying to get has been blocked, right? So yet again, another example of a control that I can apply to allow people to work online, right? I'm still doing all that stuff. They're in my browser. They're my team. They're getting all that work done, but I'm not letting it take it out of my house. So that's a really good key point to kind of talk about. Forget about the first 2 seconds of the other part of the demo there, right? So old school way of having get information and work get done with external parties. We would email the heck out of everybody, right? Attachment, 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 By the time you're done working with those 10 people, you get v.80, v.83, v.90 back in emails, right? But you're also letting information go out the door, right? You don't want that, right? What these mechanisms here are allowing is I can now create policies that say, you know what? We're not letting you take information outside of my tenant, but I'll let you come in and work on it. You don't have to leave my box. You just hit edit here or edit in Word Online or Excel Online, get the work done. You're still providing that value. You're still getting that productivity. You're still getting that work done, but none of it's leaving the house, right? And that's really important because it changes the story from sending information out of the door to allowing people in to be mindful, watching what they're doing, controlling the access, controlling the information, right? That's a big difference in thought. It is sometimes a hard difference because people are so used to blocking this out. You mean I'm gonna let people in? Folks that were here for part one, remember that baby face with the angry face? You're gonna let people do what? I'm able to do this and control what they're doing and be aware of what's going on. Sure.
So with that block from download, can I just copy and paste that into another Excel document?
I could in this instance. I didn't set up that policy, but that's a separate mechanism to add to your policy. The question was, could this also allow them to copy or paste? It could. This specific policy that I've created, I didn't set that up, but I could set up an additional policy to say, don't allow copy, paste, share, download, the whole 9 yards, right? Other questions? Yes. Sorry, I missed you. I'll go ahead first.
Block like specific access for guest users to see like email addresses or members of the team.
So the question is, can I block a guest from seeing members of the team and their email addresses?
We have students and we have like teachers that are not inside the district. We don't want them to see those students' email addresses.
So that's a good question, but right now, as a member of the team, I can see the people that I'm working with. So that's kind of how that works. I'm not gonna be able to wander through the entirety of the gal, but I'll be able to reach out and say, I know his email because I'm gonna hover over that card. Yeah. Question? So I can't control the phone in my hand, that kind of stuff. That's still available for everybody, right? So there's ways to do the whole control the screen copy stuff. In fact, we used to get into some challenges where we're doing presentations where we use a hub like that and I can't present because the document's kind of like prevented from sharing. So, yes, no. Other questions? Yes? I'm sorry I don't have a mic. I wish I did. Although I'm Mike, but whatever.
Scenarios, I have two teams.
Two teams?
Two on the guest access enabled, and then two users. One is the yahoo.com, one is gmail.com. And then I want to give access only the yahoo.com to the team one and the gmail.com to the team two. How do I prevent those things?
So the question is, if I have two guests, one with a Yahoo email address, one with a Google email address, how do I only give one access to one and one access to another? So if you use whitelist, blacklist, that kind of governs it at the tenant level. In that instance, what you would need is another mechanism like I showed off earlier in terms of your team requests, another mechanism that says enter the guest that you want added to team A, team B. That's the only way to do it right now. I can't like segment that at that level. Question in the back.
So if I open up sharing through this, how does that work with the other like SharePoint or OneDrive global setting, external sharing?
So I'm going to say that. So in this instance, let's run up to the front. Yay. If I go to positions available, we'll go to open in SharePoint. Wait till the thing stops spinning. I'll go right here. Come on. Whoop. Dang it. Hit the wrong button. Try that again. I can't do the same mechanisms in SharePoint because the policy is the policy. All right? So that was the question. Can I go into SharePoint and kind of bypass? I can't do that. Hey, where'd you go? And everything's not working today. Yay. Let's go back over here. So as you can see from the perspective of the different policies that we have, let's go through, in fact, let's go through all this. Let's go through the bottom. That's the last screenshot of where I'm adding information here because I'm still in my web browser, right? I can create all these other different policies as granular as I want or as wide as I want based upon the actions that I want people to take. And even go down to either an individual or just say all up all guests or down to a group, right? I can get as wide or as narrow as I want. I can get as crazy as I want from a policy perspective within Intune based upon whatever I have from a license perspective, all that other stuff. So I can start kind of planning how I should provide governance and awareness for all these operations in my tenant. You don't want to create like 30,000 policies day one and say turn on everything. You don't know what's going to break, right? You want to understand how people work as well. Because the intent isn't to stop people from working, but to get them to be able to work within the constraints and confines of how you want to work. Still be safe, right? So there's that happy medium you got to work from a perspective of a business side and the IT side. Does that sound good? All right. That being said, we'll go on this side of the fence. That's kind of it for this topic. If you have other questions, you're more than welcome to come up. If you want to take a quick scan of that QR code, that's to my LinkedIn profile. I'm going to have the decks up there. Thanks for coming. Enjoy the rest of your night. I really appreciate the time over lunch. You guys have the rest of a good day.